ਜਸ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੋਸਟ ਆਸ਼ਮਿਤਾ। ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ। ਅੱਜ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਹੈਡਲਾਈਨਸ ਹਨ ਜੋ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂ। ਕਾਫੀ ਇਹ ਬਿਜ਼ੀ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ ਰਿਹਾ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਸਾਈਕਲ ਲਈ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਲੈਵਲ 'ਤੇ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਲੈਵਲ 'ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ। ਬਟ ਅੱਜ ਇਨ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਨਵੇਂ ਪੱਖੋਂ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਇੱਕ ਨਵਾਂ ਪਰਸਪੈਕਟਿਵ ਇਹਨਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਲਵਾਂਗੇ। ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਜੋ ਸਾਰੇ ਇੰਸੀਡੈਂਟਸ ਹਨ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਲਗਾਤਾਰ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਸਾਈਕਲ ਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਹਨ, इन चीज़ों के पिछे जो ड्राइवर है, जो चीज़ मोटिवेट करती है इहो जे हादसियां नूं, वो एक्चुअली किसी भी एक इंसीडेंट तो बहुत वड्डी है कि अगर असी कुछ मोटिवेशनस की गल करिए तो वैल्यूज़ की भी गल आती है, जिन वैल्यूज़ करके इहो जे हादसे, इहो जे इंसीडेंट्स, इहो जी खबरां सानू तुहाडे अगे पेश करनियां पैंदियां। एंड टू डिस्कस दिस टॉपिक मैनूं बहुत खुशी हो रही है कि साडे नाल एक बहुत ही इस्टीम्ड गैसट अज स्टूडियो दे विच पहुंचे हन, all the way from the UK. Joining us in the studio tonight, please join me in welcoming our guest for this evening, Dr. Mandeep Kaur Rai Dhillon. सब तो पहले Dr. Mandeep, so good to have you. Program दे विच स्वागत। सत श्री अकाल।
सत श्री अकाल जी।
Dr. Mandeep, you have come all the way from the UK. You are visiting the United States for some wonderful events. You were just at the SICK Chamber of Commerce event this past weekend. And we're so glad you're joining us tonight. We're going to talk about your recent publication, The Values Compass, and how some of the recent events we're hearing about in the news are driven by some of these values at a larger level. But before we get there, for those of our viewers that are seeing you for the first time, have an opportunity to learn about you tonight, let's get a little bit of your background. You have such an illustrious background, whether it's venture capitalist, finance, broadcast journalist with the BBC. You have all manner of prestigious educational institutions to your name, whether it's Harvard or London School of Economics. So where was the origination of Dr. Mandeep, and how did you get to where you are today, traveling over 150 countries, writing a book about it, and joining us here in New York?
Firstly, can I just say wow to your Punjabi? Edi Punjabi kinni sundar hai, sachi. Tusi meri Punjabi di gall karte si, thodi Punjabi. Thank you. Thode loves bahut hi pyare hai, and very fitting.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah. So I appreciate the comment. It's really nice, especially coming from someone from England, because normally ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਬੜੀ ਮਿੱਠੀ ਬੋਲੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਦੀ. So it's so good to have you in the studio. I'm sure you probably hear our accents are like, oh.
I think especially skika kabra. I know the word kabra. You said some words, Jeremy. I was like, wow. I'm third generation. My children are fourth generation. You are?
I'm second generation.
Second generation. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's just brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. You say that you're third generation, right? And you grew up in the UK in some not so diverse areas, right? What were those early years like for your family, growing up in cities or towns where maybe you were the only brown family? How was that?
So my grandfather had moved to Birmingham, which is a very multicultural city, and anyone in the UK you really feel as home in the UK, because in Birmingham, because anyone and everyone belongs. And there are some very good strong gurdwara like Soho Road Nishkam, Jatta, known as the Soho Road Gurdwara, or I was brought up in a place called Smethwick, where there's a really strong Punjabi community. And my parents, all my mother's family is in California, and all my father's family is in the UK generally. And so my mother thought, "Asi meri family ko chal jaye thodak char," and we moved to California when I was young.
Oh wow!
And my father was like, "Ithe ta sare kam hi kam karte hain."
Welcome to America. Absolutely.
So he really missed that work-life balance. Yes. And I think the value system in the UK is slightly different to what it is here. And he was really astute to that and said, this is not cutting it for me. Why don't we find some kind of middle ground? And so the middle ground for my parents was that we had some small family in Wiltshire, Swindon, that was on my mum's side, and the majority of the family in Birmingham on my father's side. So they kind of almost drew a line, and the bit in between was Gloucestershire.
Compromise.
Yes, compromise, the value of Morocco. And in Gloucestershire, or in this small, so shops, generally Indians at that time run corner shops.
Yes.
And ran corner shops. And there are some actually very good programs, comics, everything about kind of the Indian corner shop. And we were very quintessentially Indian, and we ran a corner shop. But we ran the corner shop in the most rough part of Gloucestershire, in a small village called Churchdown, because who is it that goes to a corner shop? People who are living kind of a little bit hand to mouth.
Yes.
So we lived in this council estate, and the corner shop was right in the centre of the council estate, and there were no one of colour. And I don't even know if you can say that term anymore, colour. But no one Chinese, no one black, no one of any other nationality or ethnicity than white, Anglo-Saxon. So I remember going from our shop to school. I used to walk. We're in a small village. And one day I was tripped up on my way to school, and there was blood everywhere. My nose had broken, and I didn't realize it, but I was like holding my face getting into school. And the school teacher said to the small boy who had tripped me up, "Why did you do that? Like, what possessed you to trip her up?" And he said, "Oh, I just wanted to see if her blood was red or maybe it's brown. I just wanted to see."
Wow.
And so it's that kind of level of ignorance. I wouldn't even call it racism. I'd call it ignorance, just not knowing. And then in the estate, there were levels of, but I mean, we had signs drawn up every other day and graffiti painted on the shop saying, "Get out, you Pakis," which is like a derogatory term, right, for anyone brown. It's not about Pakistani or not Pakistani, it's just get out, brown people. And we had bars on the window because you couldn't anticipate when a brick was going to come through the window. And many times it did, and on one occasion it hit my mother on the head. And I remember her bleeding, holding her head. So it's like, it was very, very extreme. And I bring this up, or I'm glad you brought it up, because I know this weekend we've just had an incident, and potentially a hate crime incident against a Sardar.
Yes.
So the fact is that whether that happened 30 years ago, which it did, or whether my son and I are told to go home when we're on a bus in central London just a few years ago as Brexit was happening.
Yes.
And I was like, what do you mean? We are going home. But that's obviously not what they meant.
Yeah.
Or whether it's today or yesterday at the Gurdwara hearing Queens. It's just this need for education that everyone is equally valid, and your colour of your skin does not determine your value or your worth.
Absolutely.
It's as relevant today as it was when I was growing up.
Dr. Mandeep, you referenced, you kind of made a comparison, right, from the kind of experience you had growing up in a part of England that lacked diversity severely. And so, like you said, lack of education, it certainly applies in that situation, that you would hope with more instances of interaction with people of different colors, backgrounds, faiths, nationalities, that those kind of incidents would go down. And then you referenced the hate crime that took place. Richmond Hill 118 ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੇ ਲਾਗੇ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਨੂੰ ਸੈਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਕੁੱਟਿਆ ਗਿਆ, and it is being potentially investigated, like you said, as a hate crime. Everyone in New York, from the New York mayor to the local councilman to the governor today, have issued statements on behalf of this Sardarji, and we are not taking his name to respect the family's wishes to keep anonymous. But the point is, here in New York, especially where this incident took place, is literally a street called Punjab Avenue. It is known as the Gad of Punjabis in New York. So many people come here first and then they go elsewhere, right? And there's it's a nexus of gurdwaras. And for something to happen in that area, how do you make sense of that in terms of there's clearly no lack of diversity in Richmond Hill, in 118 near the Gurdwara where this took place, yet something like this happened? How do you make sense of that?
Because I think you attack where you see threat, potentially. And I'm not a threat. I'm a small schoolgirl on my way to school. He was just being curious. But similar to Southall, right, in the UK, or any concentration of a group, whether it be Somalians, whether it be Indians, whether it be whomever, they can be attacked. We have seen it, and I think that's potentially what's happened here. I remember I used to report for the UNDP, so in the headquarters of New York, and worked as a journalist there. And when we were called, I remember on occasions, especially after 9/11, it was a sense of, can you cover this crime that's happened not just to Muslims wearing turbans, but also any Sikh person was called a Taliban, right? Part of the Taliban. And
terrorist.
They were attacked and attacked and attacked and attacked. And it didn't matter whether they were in the heart of New York or whether they were in Pittsburgh or wherever.
Rural America, absolutely. So, you know, we talked a little bit about this local kind of, you know, experience that you've had, local experiences that we are still seeing here. But I want to, you know, go beyond that. I want to cover some of the other headlines today and some of the work that you've put into this book, The Values Compass, where you take lessons from your travels to 101 ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਫ਼ਰ ਕਰਕੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਮਨਦੀਪ ਨੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਆਈ ਵਾਂਟ ਟੂ ਗੈਟ ਟੂ दैट। ਇੱਥੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਲਈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਰੁਕਣਾ ਪੈ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਵਿਊਅਰਸ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਨਾ ਜਾਓ, ਡਾਕਟਰ ਮਨਦੀਪ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਨਵਰਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਾਰੀ ਰਹੇਗੀ। ਮਿਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਉਸ ਪਾਰ। ब्रेक तो बाद सारे ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ। ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਹੋਏ ਗੈਸਟ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਮਨਦੀਪ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਸਫ਼ਰਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ, ਆਪ ਦੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਐਂਸਿਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਾਫੀ ਕੁਝ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰੇ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸੋ ਮਚ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਮਨਦੀਪ ਜੁਆਇਨਿੰਗ ਅਸ ਆਲ ਦ ਵੇ ਫਰਮ ਦ UK। ਉੱਦਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਾਂਗੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬੋਲੋ, ਬਟ ਆਈ ਲਵ ਯੂਰ ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਐਕਸੈਂਟ। ਆਮ ਸ਼ੋਰ ਵਿਊਅਰਸ ਆਰ ਇੰਜੋਇੰਗ ਇਟ ਐਜ਼ ਵੈਲ, ਸੋ ਡੂ ਇੰਡulge us. Dr. Mandeep, you know, there's a couple of other big things that took place this weekend, right? And you not only have this experience as a broadcast journalist from your time at the BBC, but you have this experience of essentially studying humans all over the world because of your travels. And one of the stories that was, came up this weekend as a big, international update was the story out of Pakistan with Imran Khan, Prime Minister, and the whole vote of no confidence from his parliament and the subsequent actions that he's taking to retain power. Pakistan, as we all know, Punjabis share a very deep relationship with Pakistan, has in its, freed existence never once seen a prime minister carry out their full 5-year term. And it's a bit disheartening to see Imran Khan, who had come with so many promises, now face a similar fate. Obviously, there's a lot that yet remains about the story that will develop in the coming days. But the value that you've assigned to each of the countries, what is the value for Pakistan, and how do you think it fits into this kind of a scenario, which once again is not a new scenario? It repeats over and over and over again, sometimes more violently than others, but in any case, the people are faced with political upheaval. The people of Pakistan, the average Pakistani, is yet again faced with this challenge. How does the value that you've assigned to Pakistan fit into that?
So I was really excited. ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਫਾਈਨਲੀ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਗਈ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਨਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਬੀਬੀ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਤੋਂ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਫੈਜ਼ਲਾਬਾਦ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ।
Oh wow.
Actually a small village called Chuck 94. And so ਜਦੋਂ ਦਾ partition ਹੋਇਆ ਹੁਣ 70 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ, I really wanted to visit her home village, her hometown, and see what that journey was like. And ਮੈਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਲਈ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਕਰਦੀ ਸੀ denial ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ, and ਉਦੋਂ ਹੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ permission ਮਿਲੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹ ਵਾਗਾ border ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹਾ ਹੋਇਆ।
ਵਾਗਾ border, yep.
So 2-3-4 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਹੁਣ, a few years, and ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਸੀ। ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਉਹ ਟ੍ਰੇਨ ਲਈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵਾਗਾ border ਨੂੰ ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਐਂਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਉਹ ਸ਼ੋਰ ਮਚੋਰ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ at the border, ਉਹ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਕੀਤਾ। And I was really lucky that at Harvard Business School, one of my closest friends is Jahangir.
Okay.
And Jahan is part of a military family. His father's in the military, and he could also, they had my back. I was really well looked after there. And Jahan Zeb also has a ton of courage, because he had very big political roles in Punjab, and always had a side hustle, which has become bigger and bigger, of producing the kind of schooling system and education system that young people would want in Punjab, in Pakistan, as opposed to what was being given to them. And so, to answer your question really directly, what I've seen in the people there, what I saw while I was there, and what we've seen in the 70-year history, is that the population, regardless of what's happening politically, and especially what's happening politically, have this courage of taking civil duties, civil rights, civil responsibilities into their own hands, and providing where the absence of the government can't, or where the government cannot. So whether that means charity, whether it means a hospital or a medical system, whether it means an education system, like Amna and Jahan, this couple, are running kindergartens, nurseries, schools. They're just stepping up, and they're not the only ones. So many young and older Pakistanis have stepped up. And imagine the courage that takes when you know your government is perhaps going to be slighted because you've taken those steps, or they're not going to be on your side. I mean, there are countless, and the book holds them, stories of extremely courageous Pakistanis who have taken even their life at risk in order to put these systems in place. And so when anyone, including Pakistanis, look at courage, initially they'll be like, "Wah, courage deta kyo?" But then when they read it, they're like, "Yeah, okay, we can see, because we've seen the struggles that people have gone through on all kinds of levels."
I mean, it's so interesting that you paint it from that perspective, or you share that perspective with us, of course, in the book as well, because Indians generally have a certain view about Pakistan, and then I dare say that Punjabis have a different view than the average Indian does of Pakistan as well. They have a certain almost it's like a bittersweet love-hate relationship that used to be our brother's land, and today there's a border and there's this divide between us.
More than that, it used to be like more. I saw so much of our Sikh history in Punjab, almost more
in Pakistani Punjab.
Yeah, in Pakistani Punjab, like Nankana Sahib, not just where Guru Nanak Dev Ji was born, but the tree under which they meditated, the school, everything, like where Guru Arjan Dev Ji, the Tati Tava, where they met with the ancestors, or not the ancestors, the predecessors, like the grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Bhai Mardana, and the great-great-grandchildren, and that whole lineage still sings at that Gurdwara, where, when you go to Lahore and you see the fort, and opposite is Guru Arjan Dev Ji's Gurdwara, where that's like so much of our history, where in the Ardas it says Ang Ang Katwaye Kopriya Laya. You see those torture kind of chambers in certain Gurdwara. Like there is just, it's extremely spiritual and extremely incredible. And thank goodness now that I think Sikhs have a free pass almost to be able to enter and go straight to do a yatra, for example. Yes, that tie.
Would you say
strong.
that, and I don't mean to overreach with these connections here, but would you say that there was courage exemplified by the Pakistani people, no matter which entity they belong to restore and to open those doors, to let Sikhs in, to let people from all across the world in, to access this heritage, this Sikh history that lives on that land?
I do not know enough about how it came about. I remember meeting with the ministers when it was coming about, and them saying to me, we really, like, whether it be all forms of seva was happening within the Gurdwara and beyond, Seva is never only about Gurdwara, right? Seva is always about giving beyond and giving to everyone. And so I think that that level of appreciation was being shown in, we welcome the Sikh community rather than, but I don't know the history enough to be able to say categorically. All I know is my experience. So this book is really looking at the positive, deliberately looking at the positive, because we can all talk about negative all day long, and the media is very good at that. So it's deliberately looking at the positive, and it's deliberately looking at it through a specific lens, such that this is the wisdom that we want to give our children, or that we want to give our youth, or that we want to see in the world. What do we want? We want courage. We want to see faith, as I gave to India, or we want to see, compassion or empathy or liberty or equality. And these are the things that I deliberately focus on, rather than, it's another change of government.
I love that, because I think there's definitely a dearth of forced positive in this world, and coming from a place of true experience, because you have to have that mindset when you're experiencing these situations to then portray that for others to read and experience for themselves as well. So, once again, the book we're talking about is The Values Compass. Author Dr. Mandeep ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਹੈ. I want to take this conversation further. We've done local, we've done at the national level, but international level ਤੇ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਇਸ weekend ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ. And since our author is an extremely well-traveled international personality, I'd love to hear her perspective on all of those issues. Viewers, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਨਾ ਜਾਓ, ਮਿਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ break ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ. ब्रेक तो बाद मुड़ हाजिर होए तुसी वेख रहे हो प्रोग्राम अज दा मुद्दा. साडे नाल स्टूडियो च पहुंचे हुए डॉक्टर मनदीप, आप द एक्सपीरियंसेस, इंटरनेशनल एक्सपीरियंसेस साडे नाल शेयर कर रहे. थैंक यू सो मच डॉक्टर मनदीप. It's always nice to hear about some of the same things that we get used to hearing about. You're right, the news loves to portray the worst of the evils taking place in the world, right? And you're a news person, so you know the famous saying, if it bleeds, it leads, right? जिन्ना ज़्यादा उदे विच खबर दे विच खराबी होए, उन्नी ज़्यादा उन्नू लोकां ने वेखना है, right? But sometimes that is it brings you down and it spreads negativity. So it's great to get a forced positive perspective on, real life experiences like you've done in this book. So once again, it's a Monday, it's a big news day, usually is after a long weekend. And one of the big ongoing stories that we keep hearing updates about is the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the military crisis that's, escalating, it seems. I won't get too much into it because once again, it is very disheartening to hear some of the stuff that's taken place this weekend in terms of civilian casualties and all of that. But even the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, you can frame through the values that you have personally experienced in these countries, right? You gave a wonderful kind of explanation about this at the event a couple of days back. I'd love to have you share that with our viewers.
Okay, so this book was never meant to be a crystal ball, although it looks like a crystal ball there. That's the globe, not a crystal ball. It's simply looking at the world through values, because we see values, we operate through our values all the time. Our decisions are all being made through our values, but we never talk about it, we're never necessarily clear about it. It's like there's this software at the back of your head or in your subconscious, and you bring it into the forefront and say, okay, what am I actively choosing? That's kind of the message of the book. And when I show it through the lens of the world and show a different value per country, my aim is to show that one quality or essence or learning points that each country or each place can give us, or each community. And in the case for Ukraine, it was fortitude. And in the case of Russia, Ukraine was freedom and Russia was fortitude. I remember thinking FF, because they're both F coincidentally. And now you see, and I give a lot of justification of why Ukraine, for many, many, many centuries, for the longest time, has been stood for freedom and fought for freedom and wanted freedom. This is not something that's just happened overnight. I know it seems like that, but actually Ukraine has been under threat or been fighting for this freedom for the longest of times. And so now when it comes up and we're like freedom for Ukraine, it's already written, and hence it's in the book. And the same with Russia's need or emphasis on strength, or even beyond strength, this kind of sense of fortitude. It's what's celebrated in Russia. It's what's so important in Russia. It's what the society and the fabric of society is built upon. So when you, and it doesn't just stop there, like if you get a sense of the world around you, you can see, oh, that is why this country responded in this particular way to COVID, for example, or to the pandemic. Or that is why we see what we see. Like, I studied politics, economics, philosophy, and the aim of that was to understand why the world works the way it works, or why it is the way it is. And so taking that deeper into the place of values, this book helps you figure out, oh, this is what's happening in this place and why.
Right.
So, for example, with the pandemic,
Right.
you could see America, for example, is entrepreneurial. And their attitude towards the pandemic was also to pivot until they got it right.
Yeah.
Whereas England is very steadfast, like keep calm, carry on.
Yeah.
So whether there is, whether we're dealing with Omicron or not, the nation has just decided it's going to just march on.
Carry on, business as usual.
Yeah, business as usual. It's not to say that there is no COVID, but just we're going to stop testing, or we're going to stop asking for a passenger locator form, or we're going to stop asking for PCRs, and we're going to, we're just going to carry on, march on. Or with the case of Italy, for example, it was one of the first to really suffer deeply, and it suffered because of the fashion trade and so much Chinese, Italian.
They were the first country to lock down, I remember.
Exactly. And they have a real sense of attention to detail. So, they'll say, scarf or they'll have pedals in the place of faucets, like instead of turning
so you
a
don't
tap.
have to touch.
Yeah, so tiny little things like that actually really helped it during the pandemic. It had a level of sanitation and a level of hygiene or sanitization that you would only have in a country that's really specific and has a lot of attention to detail or care. And so it was able to actually deal with the pandemic in a really effective manner, for example. So that you see this all over the world, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, or whether it's Colombia and it's, embracing of diversity, whatever it is, it helps you explain and understand the world.
So,
and not just politically, but also in terms of doing business in different places.
So, and you had mentioned that, and we'll get a little bit more into who is the intended audience for the book, right? And what are the intended uses, whether it's personal or professional or what have you. But just out of curiosity, where we're talking about these values, these single words that you have kind of attached based on your personal experience, and
but also research.
And research, of course, research, and they're by no means exhaustive, right? That this is the only adjective to describe the country. But I'm curious, since we're talking about some of these international traits that countries exhibit that do define them and also in some way predict the way they're going to react to certain scenarios, right? As a whole. Tell us about the word that you have assigned to India. I know you mentioned it briefly before, what that word is, or what that value is, and why.
So, it's faith, and there are so many reasons why it's faith. Like, most average people wouldn't even get into a rickshaw, but it helps that every single god on the planet happens to be on the windscreen, right? It gives you a sense of, I'm being protected here. Or whether how you name your children, where, you have a day where you worship the tools that you work with, whether it's a telephone, whether it's a computer, whether it's your iron. So much is done in that country according to faith. And that's not just religion. Actually, I didn't choose the word religion. I chose the word faith. We see people all over the world go to India for this sense of spirituality, whether it be the Beatles or whether it be
pray, love,
right, or John Bon Jovi or Steve Jobs or whomever. Like there's this sense of pilgrimage and a sense of how often do people talk about some greater force or greater power or I mean, think about even just the Sikh or the Hindu or the Muslim community, how integral, or indeed the Buddhist, the Jewish, the Christian, like it's secular, like how many different faiths are celebrated.
Right.
And they're celebrating each other's faiths, but how integral that is to society.
I really I think it's important here to distinction karni bahut zaruri hai, the faith between religion, right? Because religion is something that is rampant, but faith really makes a society move forward. In a country like India, I remember one experience, someone was talking about a light pole in a crowded part of Delhi, right? And it's overburdened with wires. It's like the biggest, electrical fire, every kind of hazard you could ever imagine, right? This huge pole. Viewers, to definitely visualize kar sakde ho what I'm talking about. And someone had just, casually said, oh, ये भरोसे ते चल रहा है, like रब राखा है ना, कि कुछ नहीं है तो इतना ही है बस, right? And it's like everyday things for a country like India to march forward. It is definitely faith in something, doesn't matter what it is, but in something greater than the average
and even
person.
with the Kisana, like the farmers movement, I feel like that was very much driven with this sense of sanu pata nahi si kidda karna, but ho jana. And you see a real difference in Punjab now. I was just there 2 weeks ago, and I feel like Punjab has become more Punjabi as a result of that. And also in Harmandir Sahib, like we started this seva, and kind of like looking at the structure of Harmandir Sahib, which has degraded because the number of people, I was there just 2 weeks ago, thousands, hundreds of thousands. You're in a line to go into the Darbar Sahib from anywhere between 2 and 4 hours. Like a line, din hove, raat hove, Sunday hove, Monday hove. I know. Yeah. And the amount of, janta, santa, sangat that goes through. And, it it's sitting in water, the hot sun. You can imagine what wear and tear is happening. There is it pulls the world in.
I think that sentiment of pilgrimage, you're right, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਦਰਬਾਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਹੋਵੇ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਹੋਰ religious ਸਥਾਨ ਹੋਏ, ਲੋਕੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ਰਧਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, and that is definitely really I think highlighted in India. So we keep
I was just going to say the point of this is not to, yes, it's to understand the world, but it's really to understand yourself. Like, what are the values that are important to you? Like, do you bring in faith when you're going through a okki kari, right, when things are tough? Or do you lose your faith at that point? Is it really faith that matters to you?
Right.
Or is it, excellence or family or creativity or beauty or whatever it is? It helps you get to what triggers you, what motivates you, what keeps you going, and helps you identify what will help you be your very best self.
So you're kind of you're perfectly leading us into jithe main conversation leke jana chahndi si, which is how do you determine what your values are? How do you use a book like this for whatever need you may have, like I said, personal or professional? But us to pehle ek hor choti ji break lai sanu rukna pe raha hai, kithe na jao, conversation bilkul is tarah jari rahegi, break to us par. ब्रेक तो बाद एक बारी फिर सारे ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਮਨਦੀਪ ਇਟਸ ਬੀਨ ਸੱਚ ਅ enlightening conversation. ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾਤਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮੌਕਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਰੰਟ ਇਵੈਂਟਸ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, but taking it from a higher level, a spiritual, philosophical level almost. So thank you for your insight and your forced positivity. ਪੂਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ positivity ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ, certainly in any news program, so thank you for that. Dr. Mandeep, your book, The Values Compass, you've assigned one value to 101 countries. 101 ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ value assign ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ based on your research, your travels, your experiences with the people and the places you visited. ਅਗਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਸਾਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਹੋਏ ਕਿ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਪਰਸਨਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਹੋਏ ਜਾਂ in general ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, how would you describe it to them?
So ਪਹਿਲੀ ਚੀਜ਼, I have travelled to each and every one of these countries, and if I was to say ਕਿ value ਕੀ ਆ, a value is ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੋਚਦੇ value ਬੋਲਿਆ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਪਿਆਰੀ ਆ. we are a treasure trove of values, right? Gurbani mein bhi likhya hai ki tusi thode gun tusi chonna thode gun kare but jere bhi gun rab ja thode ch bhi hai. So whether you want to focus on patience or sharing Vankishakna or Seva or Sangat Simran, whatever it be, it helps you get closer to what you choose because it takes out the noise of trying to do everything and it helps you focus on a few. And I chose 5, the Panj Pyare, deliberately for that.
Oh, wow. ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਨੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਬੁੱਕ ਲਈ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਲਈ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਨੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਨਸਪਾਇਰ ਜਾਂ ਮੋਟੀਵੇਟ ਕੀਤਾ?
ਸੋ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਹਿਜੇ ਪਾਠ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਹਿਜ ਪਾਠ ਕੀਤਾ ਇੱਕ ਅੰਗ ਰੋਜ਼ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਸੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ 5 ਸਾਲ ਲੱਗੇ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੌਲੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਨਿਚੋੜ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਐਂਡ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਨੂੰ ਖੋਲ੍ਹਦੇ ਆ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਖੋਲ੍ਹਦੇ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਕਮਨਾਮਾ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਇੱਕ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਜੇ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਸਾਖੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੜ੍ਹੋਗੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ whether it be daya, dan, compassion, it's full of these lessons. So I'd be wrong to say that it's only the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. It's not. You see these values in the Bible, in the Torah, in the Quran, in the Vedas, in every single spiritual text. Because actually, to be a good human being, a son, you are focusing on your values. That's what it means to be a good human being, to be values based and to so the aim was the inspiration is easily kind of the goodness of every individual and highlighting the goodness rather than what's the point of highlighting? How am I going to get better? Like sometimes ਅਸੀਂ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ discipline ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਣਾ to get a better child. But actually there's this one practice, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ I think it's very powerful. It's an African practice. It's called Mbutu. Okay. ਜਦੋਂ ਕੋਈ mess up ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ like when you ਕੋਈ ਗਲਤੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ 10 ਦਿਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ remind ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ actually ਕੌਣ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ best qualities ਕੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆ ਗੁੱਡ ਕੀਤਾ ਜੇ ਇਹ ਚੰਗਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ stand up ਹੋਏ ਜੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ like it's constant, it's a barrage of goodness that comes your way. Instead of putting you in prison where you're going to learn more bad habits, or instead of marking your head and saying you're banished forever or you're a bad person, no one's a bad person. You might have some adita, some habits that aren't very helpful, but habits can be changed. And this is what this focuses on, the change rather than banishing someone or thinking that something's inherently bad. Nothing or no one is inherently bad.
I would love to know, Dr. Mandeep, ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਲਿਖੀ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈ, once you completed the project, there must have been some thought in your mind of the ideal usage for it, right? ਜੋ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨੂੰ ਪੜੂਗਾ of course ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਜ਼ਰੀਏ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ experiences, lessons ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਅਪਣਾਉਣਗੇ ਜਾਂ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕਰਨਗੇ, but what is your kind of ideal is it personal, is it a professional use? ਲੋਕ ਜੋ ਕੰਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੱਗੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ ਕਾਰੋਬਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ, ਲੋਕ ਜੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਰ ਏਕਤਾ ਲੈ ਆਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ, what is the intended use or ideal reader for the book?
So this became my intention was a business book and it became the business book of the year actually in diversity, equality, inclusion. But actually in every country people have used it in their own way and it's become an international bestseller because of that, because people it took a life of its own. This is like, it's just taken a whole nother spirit. It's like God is working through this. So like in Japan they used it as the guide to the Olympics because it's looking at every country in a positive way. Why wouldn't you? The whole world is looking at you, let's celebrate this. Or in Dubai we were looking at it through the lens of the Dubai Expo, which has just gone on for the last 6 months. Or in Hungary they single-handedly made it a bestseller because the central bank said, she really is taking the best of Hungary. Like, what do we know that's positive about Togo or Benin or Peru or Paraguay or Papua New Guinea? And how does that relate to you?
Right.
How can we learn about the best of ourselves by looking at respect or cleanliness?
Right.
And I was sharing these examples from different parts of the world that you have all of those. So the aim of the book is, one, to figure out yourself, how you operate, how you can motivate yourself, how you can be your very best self. But two, in your family, how to bring out that very best self within your family group. Three, you utilize it a lot in schools. We've been doing a lot of work with schools. Four, businesses, of course, startups, but also huge companies
corporations,
use this.
Central bank.
Yes,
of
for
Hungary.
example. We've done so much work with huge companies because when they're value-centric, you want to work there and you want to buy goods and services from such companies. It's like a whole nother power that's working through them. On a national term, like I've been just recently in Barbados and we're looking at the values, or Guyana or something, like all these new countries that are not yet covered in the book that will be covered. So there isn't a level at which it doesn't work because people are a bunch of values. They're based on their values. Decisions are based on values. So whether you're an individual or a group, this work works.
Yeah, I think the most important thing here is it helps us realize that we are all connected. We are all one because the values do overlap. We share those values. And, I may have never been to some of these countries, but I may identify with those values just as passionately as the people that, have an ancestry there for generations. Dr. Mandeep, perhaps the most important question in closing. Agar asi ye book padni hoye, where can we get the book? How can we get our hands on it to read some of these wonderful lessons?
Well, I'm really grateful to North America because they were the first to publish the book. So it's available in any of your stores, whether it be Barnes & Noble, or I was just recently at the New York Public Library. They have a copy there even.
Oh, wow.
It is literally,
Wonderful.
and if it's not in your local library, please order it because they have a responsibility to give it to you. Of course, Amazon, because it's everywhere, all over, but actually here it is more readily available than anywhere else.
In bookstores.
Yeah.
I really like it to see small businesses, not that Barnes & Noble is a small business, but
No,
bookstores.
but even your local independent bookstore, that's where you can.
I like that you said
it's
small
really
businesses
important.
and libraries especially. Of course, if you have to use Amazon, that's fine too, but you can go find it at the library, you can go to your local bookstore. Dr.
Please go
Mandeep,
to your local bookstore is what
yes,
we're saying first.
I love that. Dr. Mandeep Kaur Rai Dhillon, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for making your way to New York, coming to our studio and sharing the wonderful insights. Of course, ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਮਾੜੀ ਜੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ share ਕੀਤੀਆਂ. For the full breadth of what is written in this book, ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਾਪੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਪੜੋ, ਇਹ ਤੋਂ ਸਿੱਖੋ, ਦੂਜਿਆਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਿੱਖੋ. ਸਾਡੇ ਗੁਰੂਆਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ, but I really like the book. I have a copy too, so ਮੈਂ ਵੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਲਾਈਫ ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅਪਣਾਵਾਂਗੀ. Once again, great to have you, Dr. Mandeep. It's a real pleasure. ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ viewers ਅਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰਦੇ. If they want to connect with you, how can our viewers reach out? ਅਗਰ ਕੋਈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਕੁਝ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕੋਈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, is there any way on social media or something?
Well, I think they should reach out to both of us because you were the MC at the 6th Chamber of Commerce, which was amazing. And I think that during that event, I was the keynote and I kind of said, I didn't say how to reach out to me, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. There are many, I'm on all the social media platforms. If you're on LinkedIn, Dr. Mandeep Rai, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere you can reach out to me.
That's wonderful. And once again, social media ਦਾ ਇਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਬੰਦਾ ਛੁਪ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦਾ, right? Very easily identifiable. ਇੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ. ਡਾਕਟਰ ਮਨਦੀਪ ਲਈ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਕੋਈ questions, comments, concerns ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਲਿਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. info@justbroadcasting.com, Aashmeeta @justbroadcasting.com. ਹੁਣ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ. ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ.
Sat Sri Akal ji.